You're watching EIV News Decision 2010.
As expected, the United States House of Representatives has a new majority. The Republicans claimed over 60 seats, far more than the 39 needed to create a majority over House Democrats. The new Speaker of the House, John Boehner, says this GOP overhaul will show President Obama that the American people want change. Boehner addressed a crowd of supporters with a quivering lip and even a few tears Tuesday night. In total, over 30 incumbent Democrats were defeated for seats in the House. There was only one incumbent Republican who lost.
The House may have shifted to GOP control last night, but Democrats were able to keep control of the Senate.
Here to tell us about the top 10 most interesting Senate races across the country is EIV correspondent Nick Coit. Nick?
Thanks, Cassidy. Well, with all the elections happening across the country, I'm going to take a look at the major U.S. Senate races. And we start on the other side of the country. It was a close race in Colorado, but appointed U.S. Senator Michael Bennet will be elected, which means the Tea Party is over for challenger Ken Buck. Colorado became the country's most expensive Senate race, with outside spending totaling up to $47 million. In Nevada, Assemblymember Sharon Engel was so focused on making friends with the press that Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid came out on top. This was Reid's bid for a fifth term, and for Engel, it was one of the most expensive campaigns of this election cycle. The Democratic incumbent holds on to the lead, but the results remain too close to call. The race between Patty Murray and Republican challenger Dino Rossi will likely be decided by mail-in ballots. The contenders are now separated by a single percentage point. Republican Representative Mark Kirk had a major victory in the race for Obama's former Senate seat in Illinois. He defeated Democratic hopeful and State Treasurer Alexei Giannoulias. Alaska has no clear winner yet. Write-in candidate Lisa Murkowski leads the pack with 41% of the vote. But how much of that 41% will go to her is another question. Tea Partier and Palin-backed Republican Joe Miller trails behind her at 34%. Republican Pat Toomey defeated Democratic Representative Joe Sestak in Pennsylvania. In this battleground state, Republicans earned a key victory for former Representative Pat Toomey. While Sestak benefited from Obama's rallying support in Philadelphia, Sarah Palin recorded automated phone advertisements to help Toomey out. Joe Manchin won the election in West Virginia even when his opponent, Republican John Reyes, had campaign help from Sarah Palin. Manchin's win means Democrats will hold on to the late Robert Byrd's seat. Wisconsin's election meant bad news for Democrats. Incumbent candidate Russ Feingold was defeated by Republican Blanche Lincoln with 51% of the vote. And Connecticut was down to the wire for a while, but the race has been called for Democrat Richard Blumenthal, who laid the smackdown to former wrestling CEO Linda McMahon. Despite being outspent by McMahon, who poured $50 million into her campaign, Blumenthal came out ahead with 54% of the vote. So certainly a lot of musical chairs being played across the country, guys.
It's amazing when, the McMahon family invested so much money in the campaign and it turned out the way that it did. You hate to see that. But in news in Arizona, well, Arizona just got redder. Republicans will have at least 5 of the 8 Arizona seats in the new Congress. Voters rejected the re-election bids of Democrats Ann Kirkpatrick and Harry Mitchell. Tea Party favorite Paul Gosar will take over Kirkpatrick's seat. Among the congressional newbies are also Republicans Jeff Flake and Trent Franks. Both were elected by wide margins. Last night's election proved the expected shift in power in favor of the GOP. While the Senate is still controlled by Democrats, Republicans gained 6 seats, leaving the balance at 47 to 53, with Democrats still in the majority. However, the real shift came in the House of Representatives, where Republicans gained 60 seats, leaving them with 239 seats compared to the 196 seats controlled by Democrats. Republican National Committee Chairman Michael Steele praised Republicans yesterday, saying, "My goal from the very beginning was to devolve activity away from Washington, D.C., away from the Republican National Committee, and put it in the hands of the states." While Steele's tactics have been criticized since becoming chairman, his committee was able to raise $175 million in the past 2 years, a sum that was quickly distributed to state campaigns. Democratic National Committee Chairman Tim Kaine remained optimistic when commenting on the election. He said, "We got a Democrat in the White House. We'll have a Democrat in Senate and a Republican House. Everybody's got to work together, and that's what I know the president will focus on." There was an open race for Florida's governor, as incumbent Governor Charlie Crist chose not to seek re-election. The race was won by a narrow margin of 1%, leaving Republican candidate Rick Scott triumphant over Democrat Alex Sink. Scott won by a difference of roughly 70,000 votes. Incumbent Governor Ted Strickland, as Democrat, was defeated by John Kasich, a former Republican House Budget Chairman. California Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger was ineligible to run for re-election, leaving the race open for Democrat Jerry Brown and Republican Meg Whitman to battle it out in the Golden State. Jerry Brown won by a 12% margin, although Meg Whitman is now known for running the most expensive non-presidential campaign. Republican Rick Snyder was the victor of the gubernatorial race, defeating Democrat Virg Bonero. Snyder won by an outstanding 24% margin. Current governor of New York, Democrat David Paterson, chose not to seek re-election, leaving the race open to Democrat Andrew Cuomo and Republican Carl Palladino. Cuomo, a former New York Attorney General, defeated Palladino 62% to 34%. Republican incumbent Jan Brewer fought to keep her position against Democrat Terry Goddard. Arizona's Attorney General Brewer has remained a staunch advocate of Arizona's strict immigration laws. Voters seem to have no problem with her record. She was re-elected with 55% of the vote.
With the end of any election comes mixed reactions from voters.
For more on that, we go to EIV's Brittany Berkowitz.
Boston is beaming over last night's Democratic sweep. Many were taken by surprise when the Republican wave didn't crash on the Democrat Party, especially when it came to Deval Patrick's win over Charles Baker. I was lucky enough to hear some voters' reactions, and most seemed pleased with last night's turnout.
The ballots are in, and Boston is buzzing over this year's election results.
I'm actually happy. I'm actually happy with what happened. I think it's been tough times for everyone.
Too much negative campaigning and not enough attention paid to the actual facts involved.
I feel great. I feel like the people have spoken. I'm a Democrat, so I'm very happy that Deval had won. And I watched the whole thing last night. It was great.
Polls pointed away from Democrat Deval Patrick winning, and the question at hand is whether voters were caught off guard.
Somewhat, actually. I was pleasantly surprised.
I thought people would vote for someone else. I really did.
I wasn't surprised. I know a lot of people come up for Patrick.
Patrick beat out GOP leader Charles Baker, but voters still have high hopes for the losing party.
Well, Baker's been in and out of government. I think he'll land on his feet. I thought his concession speech was really gracious.
The city of Boston has voiced their choice for Deval Patrick, and now that the Massachusetts state governor has a full term under his belt, people can expect change.
A lot of people think change can't happen overnight, so if we give him another term, it'll give him some more time to prove himself.
He has some experience now. I think he'll do much better this time.
Patrick's campaign links him to President Barack Obama, and Patrick's re-election may lead people to predict a win for Obama in 2012.
I believe that at this point, Massachusetts is very much in support of Obama's policies.
Massachusetts voters agree a future with change is a sure thing. For EIV News, I'm Brittany Berkowitz.
Still ahead on EIV News Decision 2010, politicians weren't the only thing on the ballot. We'll take a look at the 3 ballot questions and the results.
And thousands traveled to Washington, D.C. for the rally to restore sanity. Did this comedy event have any effect on the polls? More on that after the break.
You're watching EIV News Decision 2010.
Question 1 passed in Massachusetts, ending the state's alcohol tax. The tax was passed only last year. Alcohol is still subject to excise taxes at distribution. The repeal will take effect on January 1st, 2011. Money from the tax was spent on alcohol rehabilitation programs. Pro-repeal advocates spent nearly $3 million campaigning. Pro-tax advocates spent only $200,000.
EIV News reporter Wynn Harrison asked Massachusetts voters how they felt about question 1.
And she's actually in studio to tell us all about it. Wynn?
Thanks, Ross. The alcohol tax repeal caused a stir in Massachusetts, and the voters I interviewed were definitely opinionated whether they were for or against the tax. Let's take a look. In yesterday's midterm elections, Massachusetts was not only concerned with the candidates, but also alcohol. Question 1 on the ballot was to repeal the state's sales tax on alcohol, and with 52% of the vote, the tax is gone.
I think it'd be a good idea. It's already done in New Hampshire, and I guess it works out well for them.
Co-chair for the Committee Against Repealing the Alcohol Tax, Vic DeGravio, says Bay Staters should think of what the tax paid for.
One, alcohol is not a necessity. It doesn't deserve a special tax break from the sales tax. Exemption from the sales tax should be reserved for necessities of life, food, clothing, prescription medication. And the other reason we're asking people to vote no on question 1 is because the sales tax on alcohol produces $110 million of revenue that's dedicated to funding prevention, treatment, and recovery programs across Massachusetts.
Although most Massachusetts voters don't want their alcohol to be taxed, some are considering the revenue of the state.
I'm against removing the alcohol tax because I feel like it's a deterrent for people to buy too much and drink too much alcohol.
The 6% alcohol tax has only been in effect for a year, but now that it's gone, analysts say $110 million in revenue will be lost for the state. For EIV News, I'm Wynn Harrison.
The Massachusetts affordable housing law will remain intact. Last night, voters rejected Question 2, which wanted to repeal the law. Supporters of the law say it has built about 58,000 new housing units over the past 4 decades. The law also allows for private developers to bypass local zoning laws as long as they build a certain percent of affordable units. The law was founded in 1969 by state legislators. The rally to restore sanity took place last Saturday in Washington, D.C. The event, led by comedians Jon Stewart and Stephen Colbert, had an estimated 215,000 attendees. The rally did not back any political candidates and instead called for moderation in the current political frenzy. It also featured appearances by celebrities such as Kid Rock, Sheryl Crow, Ozzy Osbourne, The Roots, and John Legend. If you thought you got a lot of political phone calls, think again. Comcast received so many robocalls on election eve that the congestion disrupted service in eastern Massachusetts and New Hampshire. The outages were reported as campaigns made their final push to reach voters. The company would not say how many customers were affected.
Thank you for tuning in to this special edition of EIV News.
Join us for our regular broadcast at the same time next week. Have a good night.
This has been a presentation of EIV News and Emerson Independent Video. For more, visit us online at eivnews.com.